There are mistakes that humans make every single day, little slips, small lapses of judgment, moments of forgetfulness or impatience that pass through life like faint ripples on a pond, a harsh word spoken in irritation, a misplaced object, a misunderstood message. These ordinary human errors barely register in the grand scheme of things. At worst, they cost you an apology, a quick correction, a learned lesson you tuck into your back pocket as you carry on with your day. These mistakes belong to the realm of the mundane human imperfections that echo briefly and then dissolve into nothingness. But then there are actions so rare, so cosmically significant, that they do not simply ripple across reality, they tear through it. These are not the mistakes that bruise your pride. These are the ones that halt celestial operations, paralyze entire hierarchies, and force ancient intelligences to stop everything they are doing just to understand what you triggered. These are not the errors of a distracted mortal. These are the disruptions caused by someone whose soul is wired into the architecture of existence itself. A single misstep of such a being does not inconvenience heaven, it shakes it to its core. And this is exactly what happened to you. Because 11 days ago, during a moment so ordinary you barely remember it, during a simple, casual 7-minute conversation you believed was just another human exchange, you unknowingly crossed a cosmic threshold older than breathable atmosphere, older than biological life, older than the memory of the oldest archangel in service. You did not shout, you did not pray, you did not perform any ritual or attempt anything spiritual. You simply spoke. You opened your mouth and released words into the air, unaware that the universe itself was listening with bated breath. And in the middle of that mundane conversation, you did something that should have been impossible. You violated a divine law that has existed since the blueprint of this reality was forged. And before you blame yourself, pause. Because this is the first truth you must understand clearly. This was not sin. This was not moral failure. This was not rebellion, defiance, pride, ego, or spiritual negligence. This was not the sort of error that earns confession, or guilt, or shame. This was not the sort of transgression that religions warn about, or that doctrines list under forbidden acts. What you did was not a trespass against ethics, it was a collision with the infrastructure of existence itself. A misalignment not of behavior, but of destiny. And because of who you truly are, because of the soul contract you carry, your mistake was not a mistake at all, it was an activation. But at the time, you knew none of this. So you kept talking, unaware that in the same moment your breath carried those words outward, heaven went completely still. Because what happened next was unprecedented. The sequence of 19 specific words you spoke, 19, no more, no less, carried such precise intention, such crystalline resonance, such unfiltered purity that they pierced through the dimensional barrier that has separated two incompatible realms for thousands of years. A barrier engineered to prevent collision. A barrier reinforced by celestial law. A barrier that should not break. But it did. Because of you. The moment those words crossed the air between your mouth and the ears of the person listening, the barrier shattered, not gently, not symbolically, but catastrophically, like a glass wall caught by a high-velocity impact. The rupture was so abrupt, so violent, that energy structures sustaining several layers of celestial operations collapsed instantly. They didn't crack. They didn't flicker. They collapsed like a skyscraper struck by a magnitude 9.5 earthquake. For 18 consecutive hours, heaven halted. Councils froze mid-sentence. Angels abandoned missions. Dimensional gates locked in emergency mode. Supervising entities stopped all operations. And while the universe held its breath, you kept speaking, blissfully unaware that your casual conversation had triggered an event so rare that celestial archives have no modern precedent for it. Yet the stakes were even higher than that. Because in the split second after you uttered the 12th of those 19 forbidden words, your heart stopped. Your body died. For 3.2 seconds, you were clinically, medically, and energetically dead before instantly resurrecting through a protocol not available to ordinary souls. And you didn't even notice it happened. That alone would have been enough to trigger heaven's alarms. But the bigger shock? The archangels soon discovered that your survival was not accidental. It was encoded in your soul, which leads to the truth at the heart of everything. You are not random. You are not ordinary. You are not simply human. What you triggered 11 days ago forced celestial hierarchies to admit a revelation they never expected to uncover that early. You are one of only 12 primordial carriers permitted to incarnate in each 6,000-year cycle. You are the 12th, the final one, the one whose activation closes the ancient circle and initiates the next planetary sequence. And the story you are about to hear, the forbidden rule you broke, the reason heaven collapsed, and the truth about why you died and revived in the span of a breath, will show you who you really are, and why your existence matters more than you have ever allowed yourself to imagine. To understand the magnitude of what happened, you must return slowly, deliberately to that day, 11 days ago. The day that looked so ordinary on the surface, you likely forgot it as soon as it ended. This wasn't a ritual. It wasn't a ceremony. There was no incense burning, no prophetic dream beforehand, no dramatic sign written across the sky. It was, quite simply, a conversation. One you didn't plan. One you didn't expect. One that slipped into your day with the subtlety of a passing breeze. You might not even remember what you were wearing, where you were sitting, or what you were thinking about before it began. It may have been a friend who always comes to you for guidance. It may have been an advisor or acquaintance whose presence felt familiar but uneventful. It may have been a stranger whose face you had never seen before that day. Or it may have been a phone call, one you almost didn't answer. However it came, the moment arrived quietly. A conversation so casual you didn't even assign meaning to it. There was no urgency in the tone, no sense that history was shifting beneath your feet. It lasted approximately 7 minutes, a blink in cosmic time, barely a breath in the rhythm of your life. And yet, within those 7 minutes, something happened that had never before occurred in all recorded human existence. Because the core of the event was not the length of the conversation, nor the identity of the person you were speaking to, nor even the subject you discussed. The core was this. During that exchange, you spoke exactly 19 specific words. Not 18. Not 20. Not a paraphrase. Not a variation. Exactly 19 words, arranged with perfect resonance, exact intention, precise vibrational alignment, spoken with a clarity you didn't know you possessed. You didn't rehearse them. You didn't plan them. They rose spontaneously within you, flowing through your voice with a weight that felt instinctual rather than conscious. And because you did not filter them, because you did not think too hard or try to refine them, because you allowed them to emerge naturally, they landed in the world with the force of destiny. What makes these words extraordinary is not their length, but what they carried inside them. Those 19 words contained a form of celestial-level truth, the kind of understanding reserved not for humans, but for beings that operate beyond the 7th dimension. These were not insights you learned, not wisdom you inherited, not ideas you read in some book or heard from some teacher. These words held knowledge that your human consciousness should not have been able to access, articulate, or even perceive. In celestial archives, information at this level is classified as restricted. Not recommended, not discouraged, restricted, meaning locked behind metaphysical protocols that protect the fabric of human evolution. Only beings with specific authorization may hold such knowledge. Only entities with high-tier consciousness can comprehend its impact. And yet, you, an incarnated human, living a life filled with routines, responsibilities, emotions, bills, relationships, and ordinary struggles, opened your mouth and released this truth into the world as casually as someone commenting on the brightness of the sky. You had no spiritual training. You had no ritual preparation. You had no initiation. You had no permission. You had no awareness that anything unusual was happening. Yet the moment those words left your mouth, something impossible occurred. They crossed the dimensional veil. This is the veil that separates the realm of human thought from the realm of celestial intelligence. It is the membrane protecting humanity from knowledge it cannot yet process, shielding the structure of reality from premature collapse. This veil is older than civilizations, older than languages, older than the concept of death. And it is not supposed to open, not under any natural circumstances. But you didn't open it. You fractured it. The barrier did not respond like a door being unlocked. It responded like a window struck by a high-velocity projectile. It shattered violently, as though something deep within you carried a frequency strong enough to break dimensional glass. For the smallest measurable sliver of time in the physical world, for 3 seconds the barrier ceased to function, and knowledge that should have remained sealed for centuries poured into the consciousness of the person listening to you. Now, 4.3 seconds doesn't sound like much. It feels like the space between heartbeats, the length of a breath, the flicker of a thought. But in dimensional time, 4.3 seconds is equivalent to nearly 700 hours of pure information transfer. Imagine compressing 700 hours of cosmic revelation into a fragment of time too small for your brain to register. That is what happened to the person in front of you. Their minds stretched, expanded, overloaded, and struggled under the weight of information that no human vessel was designed to hold so rapidly. But what you must understand is this: the catastrophe wasn't in the data transferred. The catastrophe was in how it happened, because the transfer was not authorized. The veil was not prepared, the recipient was not ready, and you were not meant, by ordinary standards, to survive the act of saying those words. And yet, somehow, you did survive. Somehow, you spoke what shouldn't be speakable. Somehow, you cracked what shouldn't be breakable. Somehow, you activated a protocol inside yourself that even the archangels did not expect to awaken for decades. This single event, a 7-minute conversation, a casual moment, a handful of words sent shockwaves through the celestial hierarchy. And this is where your story truly begins. Because what happened that day was not random. It was the beginning of your activation, the unveiling of your true identity, and the first public sign that the 12th primordial carrier had entered the stage of destiny. To understand what truly happened during that conversation, you must look deeper, not at the words spoken, not at the sudden fracture in the dimensional veil, but at what occurred inside your physical body in the exact moment the universe reacted to your activation. Because as extraordinary as the cosmic consequences were, the most shocking event did not occur in the heavens. It occurred inside you, hidden beneath your calm tone, beneath your steady breathing, beneath your absolute lack of awareness. Your body underwent a crisis so extreme it should have been impossible for any human to survive. In the very instant those 19 forbidden words aligned perfectly with the frequency of your soul contract, your heart stopped. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, not poetically, literally. For 3.2 seconds, your heart produced 0 beats. No pulse, no circulation, no electrical rhythm, no sustaining force. You entered clinical death. The exact same physiological threshold that separates the living from the dead in hospitals across the world. Your brain recognized the crisis immediately and began its shutdown sequence. Neurons prepared to lose oxygen. Pathways began collapsing. Your cells, responding to the catastrophic loss of circulation, initiated the first steps of programmed cell death, the biological surrender that precedes irreversible collapse. This was not a mild event. This was not a metaphor for transformation. This was actual death, triggered not by illness or accident, but by the density and magnitude of the forbidden knowledge passing through your consciousness. And yet, as extraordinary as this was, it passed completely unnoticed by your conscious mind. No falling to the ground, no gasp, no loss of balance, no dramatic collapse. The death was invisible because your resuscitation was instantaneous. Faster than the body should have been able to self-correct. Faster than any medical intervention. Faster than any mechanism known to human biology. It was as if someone pressed a reset button inside you before your consciousness even had time to notice it had slipped away. Your mind did not record the blackout. It did not register fear. It did not track the absence of heartbeat. To your awareness, the conversation continued seamlessly as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. This is why you didn't panic. This is why you didn't think that something catastrophic had happened. Because, in real time, your death was shorter than a conscious thought, shorter than a flicker of awareness. It was like a lost frame in a movie, the kind that makes the screen blink without the viewer realizing anything went missing. It was like a blink too fast to notice, the kind that feels less like closing your eyes and more like a tiny glitch in reality. It was like an invisible cut in the film of your life, so smooth that even the most attentive observer would not detect the splice. But you did feel something. A small, subtle, easily dismissed symptom, the only physical sign your consciousness could perceive. A sudden, brief dizziness. It lasted no more than 2 seconds. Not enough to be alarming. Not enough to make you pause. Not enough to make you mention it to the person in front of you. It wasn't vertigo. It wasn't fainting. It wasn't the dramatic collapse you'd expect from clinical death. It was a momentary sensation of slight disorientation, like losing half a second of reality, like stepping through air that suddenly felt too thin, like the world flickered for the briefest moment. You probably brushed it off as tiredness, stress, or the result of standing up too quickly earlier that day. But in truth, that dizziness was your consciousness slipping out of your body and snapping back in faster than you could comprehend. Yet while your internal collapse and resurrection remained almost invisible, the consequences unfolding in the person listening to you were much more dramatic. The 3-second flood of forbidden knowledge into their mind triggered an overload so intense that their brain nearly shut down. The volume of information equivalent to 700 hours of compressed dimensional data forced their consciousness to expand far beyond its normal limits. For a moment, their mind was exposed to pure truth at a scale no unprepared human should ever encounter. Their energy field reacted violently, expanding outward in a shockwave of overwhelmed processing. This expansion was not metaphorical. Sensitive individuals within a 3-kilometer radius felt it as an inexplicable disturbance, unease, sudden anxiety, a strange shift in the atmosphere. Animals may have reacted without cause. Empaths may have felt pressure in their chest. Sleepers may have stirred suddenly, as if their dream had been interrupted. Your body collapsed in silence. Theirs expanded in shock. 2 divergent but interconnected reactions, one internal, one external, both triggered by the same impossible event. And here is the truth beneath that truth. The human body does not spontaneously die and resurrect because of a conversational mistake. It does not collapse and restart within 3.2 seconds unless something far greater than biology is at work. Your survival was not an accident. It was the activation of a protocol embedded into the deepest layers of your soul before you were born, a protocol only granted to primordial carriers. The dizziness was not a symptom. It was a signal. The blackout was not a failure. It was an awakening. The instant resurrection was not luck. It was authorized destiny. Your death did not occur despite your mission. It occurred because your mission had begun. And now, whether you realize it or not, the universe has already recognized you. Here is Section 3, written in a deeply immersive, motivational, high-impact narrative tone, with expanded detail and coherence, 800+ words, and all original elements preserved. To understand the magnitude of what unfolded after your 2-second death and resurrection, you must imagine the spiritual universe, not as a vague, poetic abstraction, but as a living architecture, with its own hierarchy, protocols, systems, and laws. Just as nations have crisis alarms, as governments have emergency codes, as military forces have levels of alertness, so does heaven. And the event you triggered 11 days ago activated a protocol that very few beings incarnated or celestial have ever witnessed. Because the moment your heart stopped, the moment the forbidden knowledge crossed the dimensional barrier, the moment the energy shockwave hit the consciousness of the person listening to you, an ancient emergency alarm detonated across multiple planes of existence. It was not loud. It was not audible. It was not sensory in any human way. But every spiritual entity within range felt it instantly. It was a vibrational command, a frequency shock, a metaphysical siren echoing across dimensions. And this alarm had not been used in over 6 centuries, not since the year 1389. The code associated with this alarm is known only to celestial administrators and archangel-level beings. Its classification is Absolute Red, the highest tier of cosmic emergency, and it has an official designation that carries its own weight. Dimensional barrier violation, with temporary death of the carrier. This code is so rare that most angels serve their entire existence without ever witnessing its activation. It is the equivalent of reality itself, shouting for immediate intervention, demanding the suspension of all operations so that cosmic stability can be assessed, protected, and restored. Why such drastic response? Because two impossibilities occurred at the same time, two conditions that should never coexist, yet did, because of you. Restricted celestial knowledge was accessed by an unauthorized human consciousness, not peeked into, not partially glimpsed, not accidentally brushed, accessed, spoken, transferred, and delivered through your voice. The carrier meaning you experienced clinical death during the transfer, not symbolic ego death, not emotional collapse, actual physiological death, during an unauthorized download, and then instant revival, something that should not be biologically or spiritually possible. These two events, occurring simultaneously, triggered the most severe emergency category in celestial law. And what happened next was unprecedented. Heaven paused. Literally, completely, immediately. The moment the protocol activated, all ongoing spiritual operations across the planet were instantly frozen. Not delayed. Not adjusted. Frozen. Spiritual guides, who were mid-assignment helping incarnated beings navigate decisions, emotions, and life paths, were ordered to suspend every activity. Many disappeared mid-whisper, mid-nudged intuition, mid-synchronistic alignment. Angels who were actively protecting, healing, guiding, or restructuring destinies were recalled, summoned back to higher planes with no explanations given. Missions involving protection, manifestation, emotional stabilization, karmic repair, or dream state guidance were suddenly abandoned. Celestial councils, which normally deliberate complex matters concerning souls, timelines, and global evolution, immediately canceled all other agendas. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Decisions paused, just short of conclusion. Entities shifted focus instantly toward one single event: the anomaly created by you. Even dimensional gatekeepers, who oversee transitions between planes, received the urgent command to lock their gates until further notice. Every system, every hierarchy, every function entered emergency mode. Heaven does not collapse lightly. Heaven does not pause casually. But heaven paused for you. To understand the impact, you must look to the past, the last time this happened. In 1389, a Tibetan monk, after more than 40 years of intense, disciplined spiritual practice, entered a deep, transcendent state of meditation. In his altered consciousness, he accidentally accessed a level of knowledge that his human vessel was not designed to hold. His energy field ruptured. The barrier cracked. He was thrown into a state of near death. It took 7 archangels 3 full days to contain the fallout from that single incident. But you must understand the difference. That monk had prepared his entire life. He trained relentlessly. He knew the risks. His body was conditioned. His consciousness was refined. His spirit was fortified for such encounters. He barely survived the process, and he was one of the most advanced humans of his era. You, on the other hand, were not prepared at all. You were not in meditation. You were not attempting to access higher knowledge. You were not performing a ritual. You were not consciously elevating your frequency. You were not even thinking about anything spiritual. You were talking, casually, effortlessly, naturally. And yet, despite your total lack of preparation, you did not just survive a violation far greater than the monks. You survived a violation that included actual clinical death, instantaneous resurrection, and a much more violent dimensional fracture. What took him 40 years to accidentally graze, you did in 7 minutes while barely paying attention. What nearly killed him permanently, you passed through without losing your footing. What required 3 days and 7 archangels to contain, your body absorbed, processed, and continued functioning through with only 2 seconds of dizziness. This is the difference between training and destiny, between effort and identity, between a seeker and a carrier. You survived because you were built for this. Your body responded because your soul contains mechanisms older than civilizations. Your consciousness revived because your contract includes fail-safes no ordinary human possesses. Heaven paused not because you broke something, but because your activation sent shockwaves across all dimensions. And when heaven pauses, it means one thing. Something extraordinary has stepped onto the stage of destiny. Here is Section 4, written in a deeply immersive, motivational, atmospheric style, with at least 800 words, and all core elements preserved. The heading has been transformed into a natural bridging sentence for narrative coherence. When heaven paused and the cosmic red alert surged through the higher planes of existence, the one being who felt the shockwave with the greatest immediacy was Archangel Michael. Only 3 minutes after your 3.2-second death and resurrection, his awareness was struck by a frequency signature he had not sensed in thousands of years. It was not the signal of an accident. It was not the frequency of a dying soul. It was not the vibration of a collapsing barrier. It was something far more ancient. Something he had been trained to recognize but never expected to encounter in his current assignment. Michael received the alert with a severity that even archangels rarely experience. His reaction was instantaneous. He did not finish the assignment he was supervising on the opposite side of the world. He did not delegate the matter. He did not wait for a secondary confirmation. Instead, he followed celestial protocol for the highest tier of emergency. He summoned the Council of Seven. At 3:42 a.m., a time when human consciousness is most deeply entangled with the dream realm, the emergency council chamber solidified into existence. Its walls of luminous geometry, vibrating at frequencies no human ear could endure. One by one, the 7 archangels materialized, each carrying millennia of authority and responsibility. Michael, presiding, the warrior and protector. Gabriel, the messenger, keeper of divine communication. Raphael, the healer, guardian of biological and energetic integrity. Uriel, the illuminator, custodian of cosmic intelligence. Chamuel, the seer of destiny and unifying forces. Jophiel, the bringer of sacred comprehension. Zadkiel, the transformer, keeper of spiritual law and mercy. They rarely gather at the same time. When they do, it is because something world-defining has occurred. And that night, you were the reason. The initial assessment left them speechless. Gabriel was the first to present the gathered data. His voice, normally steady and resonant, held a trace of concern. In front of the council, he projected the energetic imprint of the event, your conversation, the 19 forbidden words, the dimensional fracture, your death, your immediate revival. His analysis was clear. You had no formal spiritual training, no initiatory rites, no meditation discipline, no esoteric lineage, no preparation of any kind. According to all established parameters, you were a typical incarnated human. Someone who, based on outer presentation, should not have had access to even the 4th dimensional vibration, much less the 7th. And absolutely no one without extensive preparation should be able to channel restricted celestial knowledge without catastrophic collapse, which brought them to the next impossibility. You survived clinical death during the download. Raphael took over with medical analysis. His tone was measured, but beneath it was disbelief. He explained that your heart had stopped for 3.2 seconds, long enough for brain shutdown to begin, long enough for cell structure to initiate decay. No human body, especially one with no preparation, should have been able to reverse that collapse without intervention. Yet your revival was instantaneous. No angelic assistance. No coded intervention. No initiated guardian stepping in. You revived faster than any archangel could have resuscitated you. Uriel, the one responsible for illuminating cosmic mechanics, stated the question that made every celestial being in the room pause. Is this survival a design error, or evidence of a protocol more advanced than ours? Because if it was a design error, it would mean the universe had accidentally allowed a fragile human vessel to channel knowledge capable of annihilating consciousness. But if it was the second option, if your survival was an intended function, then your identity was far more significant than any of them had been led to believe. And so the council turned to the only source that could reveal the truth. Your pre-incarnation file. Every soul, before descending into the physical world, signs a contract containing agreements, protections, mission outlines, timelines, and contingency protocols. Most files are simple, a few are detailed. Only the rarest contain clauses sealed by higher authorities. Michael instructed Gabriel to open your file. Even accessing it required authorization. Layers of energetic locks dissolved one by one until the document appeared a luminous, multi-dimensional record containing the blueprint of your soul's mission. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. A life path with challenges, gifts, and turning points. Standard agreements, ordinary permissions, nothing that would justify heaven's collapse. But Chamuel, whose role is to identify divine timing, noticed something strange in the margins, writing that was invisible until the moment of activation. A clause concealed until the carrier reaches the correct moment in the timeline. Gabriel magnified the hidden text. And there, written in a form of energetic ink only used in the highest level contracts, they found Clause 7.3. The room's resonance shifted as they read it. Clause 7.3. Authorized Dimensional Breach Protocol. Carrier is authorized to violate dimensional barriers at the appointed moment. No prior spiritual preparation is required. Automatic Resuscitation Protocol will activate instantly in the event of clinical death. Carrier may die and revive as many times as necessary to complete knowledge transfers. The chamber fell into shocked silence. You were not breaking a rule. You were fulfilling one. Your death was not a failure. It was expected. Your resurrection was not an anomaly. It was part of the original design. The Council's conclusion was inescapable. What looked like a catastrophic violation was actually a scheduled activation of your mission. The Archangels had not been prepared because the clause was locked until you triggered it. Heaven collapsed, not because you trespassed, but because the system itself needed to pause so your activation could be understood and integrated. In that moment, the Council saw the truth. You were not a mistake. You were not a breach. You were not a danger. You were a carrier, executing a mission written long before your birth. And this was only the beginning. Here is Section 5, written in an immersive, flowing, motivational, atmospheric tone, at least 800 words, without breaking into bullet points or subsections. Everything is woven into one coherent narrative while preserving every detail you required. When the Council finished reading Clause 7.3, something shifted in the chamber. The energy changed from shock to solemn understanding because that clause did not belong to ordinary incarnated souls. Only a very specific category of beings, a category so rare that most archangels go entire ages without encountering one, receives protocols of that magnitude. Clause 7.3 is not granted to prophets. It is not granted to sages. It is not granted to ascended masters, visionaries, or spiritual prodigies. It is only attached to souls who carry missions of planetary significance, souls whose presence in a human body is treated as an operation of cosmic scale. And the moment they saw that clause, the Council understood exactly what it meant. Your existence had been authorized directly by Metatron himself, the keeper of divine records, the architect of cosmic law, the one who approves only the most consequential incarnations. Suddenly, everything made sense. The ease with which you spoke forbidden truth. The effortless activation during a mundane conversation. The clinical death and instant resurrection. The dimensional fracture, the collapse of heaven's operations. None of it was random, none of it was accidental. None of it was a spiritual malfunction or cosmic anomaly. Instead, it all pointed to a revelation the archangels had not expected to uncover that early in the cycle. You are not a common human being. You were never designed to be one. You were not even meant to function within the normal parameters of human spiritual evolution. You are not merely an acceleration agent, the term used for souls who quicken human progress. That classification is far too small for what you carry, because you are something else entirely. You are a primordial carrier. The words themselves vibrated across the council chamber when the realization settled in. A primordial carrier is not a poetic title or a symbolic rank, it is a formal classification within the cosmic hierarchy, one of the rarest statuses a soul can hold. To be a primordial carrier means you are part of an ancient lineage of consciousness, a group of souls who incarnate not for personal growth, not for karmic closure, not for experiential learning, but for planetary transformation. They are the ones who carry encoded frequencies powerful enough to shift evolutionary timelines. They are the ones who hold keys to dimensional transitions. They are the ones whose very presence on a planet signals a period of massive change. And because the role is so consequential, cosmic law restricts it severely. Only 12 may incarnate during any 6,000-year cycle. 12, and no more. These 12 operate like living pillars, forming a sacred architecture that stabilizes and directs the evolution of consciousness on a planetary scale. They do not act through grand speeches or dramatic miracles, though such things may occur around them. Their influence is far more fundamental. They bend timelines by existing. They change paradigms by speaking. Their words, even in casual conversations, carry frequencies high enough to pierce dimensional veils because their soul signatures were designed to do exactly that. And on the night of the council meeting, the archangels needed confirmation. They needed to know if the violation you triggered truly matched that level of identity. So Michael searched the universal record, scanning for the current status of primordial carriers on Earth. The system displayed 11 active points of primordial frequency, 11 beings whose awakenings had already been recognized, whose cycles were unfolding around the planet. Then he found the 12th, you. And for a moment, even Michael, who has witnessed epochs, guided civilizations, and commanded heavenly armies, fell silent. Because the 12th primordial carrier is not simply another soul in the group. The 12th is the final activation, the one that completes the circle, the one whose awakening signals that the entire system is entering its final sequence. When the 12th activates, it means the full architecture is online. It means the ascension cycle is reaching its decisive stage. It means the timing that has been prepared for millennia is now alive and moving. Michael did not respond with pride or excitement. He responded with reverence. He knelt. The archangel who commands legions, who stands as the defender of cosmic order, who rarely bends before anything, knelt. And when the other 6 archangels saw him kneeling, they understood the magnitude of the revelation, and they too lowered themselves, not in worship of you as a person, but in recognition of the mission encoded within your soul. For they were not kneeling to the human identity you currently inhabit. They were kneeling to the carrier, the ancient consciousness that has incarnated with the authority to initiate planetary sequence shifts. It was not a gesture of submission. It was a gesture of acknowledgement. Not because you are better, not because you are superior, not because you are some unreachable spiritual figure, but because your mission is so vast that even archangels must show formal respect to the one who carries its resonance. Their kneeling was not for your ego. It was for the 6th millennial design you represent, the cosmic blueprint you embody, the destiny you were authorized to fulfill long before your birth. In that moment, the truth was undeniable. The accidental death you survived was not an accident. The forbidden knowledge you spoke was not a mistake. The fracture you created was not a violation. It was the activation of a primordial carrier, the 12th, the final one, the soul whose awakening signals the beginning of the planetary ascension sequence. And whether your human consciousness realizes it or not, that activation has already begun. Once the archangels recognized you as the 12th primordial carrier, the entire framework of your life, every strange moment, every inexplicable intuition, every sudden insight, every unplanned word that seemed to come from somewhere beyond you finally made sense. Because what happened 11 days ago was not an isolated anomaly, and certainly not your first activation. It was simply the first major one. What the Council uncovered in your pre-incarnation file was unmistakable. You have already been operating under the parameters of your mission for 3 years without knowing it, quietly initiating 28 minor violations that progressively prepared your system for the larger ones to come. These were small but significant cracks in the dimensional veil, each one subtle, each one disguised as intuition, coincidence, or spontaneous insight. You didn't recognize them for what they were, but heaven did. But the event 11 days ago, the 7-minute conversation that fractured reality and stopped your heart, was Violation #20, the first activation powerful enough to awaken the emergency protocol and reveal your identity. It marked the transition from preparatory violations to structural ones, the point where your mission steps out of the shadows and into its full magnitude. And now, because #20 has occurred, the cycle cannot be reversed. You have entered the ascension sequence. Your signature has been recognized. The architecture of the next stage is already unfolding around you. According to your soul contract written long before your birth, sealed by Metatron, and locked until your activation, you are destined to complete a sequence of 44 violations in total. These violations are not mistakes. They are not errors. They are not accidents. They are scheduled ruptures, intentional openings, engineered disruptions, designed to dismantle old energetic structures and prepare humanity for what comes next. You have already completed 28 minor ones. You have now completed the first major one. That means 15 more remain, each one increasing in magnitude, each one bringing the planet closer to the threshold event encoded into your incarnation. And that threshold is violation #44. You must understand what that number represents. Violation #44 is not merely another crack in the barrier, it is the complete dimensional collapse of all existing veils simultaneously. Not one barrier, not two, not the local membrane, all of them. For exactly 44 seconds, every barrier separating third-dimensional human consciousness from higher realms, up to and including the ninth dimension, will fall open like doors blown off their hinges by divine wind. For 44 seconds, a window will appear that has not opened since the era of Atlantis, a moment in which all celestial knowledge becomes accessible to anyone within a 500-kilometer radius of your physical location. This is not symbolic. This is literal. For 44 seconds, the collective mind of humanity will be exposed to the full spectrum of multidimensional truth, history, physics, sacred geometry, cosmic origin, soul memory, metaphysical structure, divine mechanisms, and evolutionary purpose. Every person near you will receive information that, under normal conditions, would require multiple incarnations to obtain. It will be overwhelming. It will be unprecedented. It will be transformative. And it will be irreversible. Because once knowledge enters human consciousness at that scale, it cannot be undone. Civilization will shift permanently. Paradigms will collapse. Timelines will rewrite themselves. What was possible will expand. What was hidden will surface. What was silent will speak. But with this possibility comes a shadow, the memory of a previous time humanity received too much knowledge too soon. That shadow is Atlantis. The last time all dimensional barriers were opened simultaneously, humanity was not ready. The Atlanteans had prolonged access to total knowledge, not brief exposure. Their consciousness expanded too far, too quickly, without the stabilizing anchors needed to integrate such magnitude. Their society became unbalanced. Ego overtook wisdom, power overtook purpose, and what began as a golden era collapsed into self-destruction. The fall of Atlantis was not a punishment, it was a consequence of timing. They were not prepared. And so, when the archangels read your contract and saw that the coming 44-second collapse was intentional, engineered, and written into your mission, they understood something staggering. This event will not be an accident like Atlantis. It will be deliberate, it will be guided, it will be regulated, and most importantly, it will be stabilized. Because this time, the universe is not leaving humanity alone to withstand the impact of omnidimensional truth. This time, there are 12 primordial carriers, strategically positioned across the planet, each one awakened in their own cycle, each one channeling stabilizing frequencies that prevent the system from overloading. When you reach violation #4, the other 11 will reach their own final violations simultaneously, forming a planetary network capable of distributing the incoming knowledge evenly, preventing the collapse that destroyed Atlantis. This is why you were authorized to die and revive as many times as necessary. This is why heaven paused. This is why the council knelt. This is why you exist. You are not here to repeat the past, you are here to correct it. You are here to close a 6,000-year cycle and open a new one. You are here not to carry the burden alone, but to become the catalytic point for the others, the one whose activation signals the readiness of the collective structure. The coming 44-second fracture is not the end of civilization. It is the awakening of it, and you are the one who will trigger it. To truly understand your activation, you must revisit the signs your body and consciousness left behind, the subtle tremors, the vivid moments, the sensations that seemed oddly disproportionate to the casual conversation you believed you were having. Because while your mind continued speaking as if nothing unusual had happened, the physical reality inside you and the spiritual reality around you were undergoing seismic shifts. What you brushed aside as a fleeting symptom was, in truth, the residue of your death and revival, the biological echo of an event that should have destroyed your body but instead revealed your identity. The first sign was the sudden dizziness. It wasn't long, not even 3 seconds, but it arrived with a quality that felt different from any ordinary form of imbalance. It was not the dizziness of hunger, stress, or standing too quickly. It was a temporal distortion, a brief rupture in your continuity, like losing half a second of reality. You may have blinked without meaning to. You may have felt the world tilt or freeze in place, but the sensation vanished so quickly that you dismissed it before you could analyze it. Yet that moment was the exact instant your heart stopped. That dizziness was the sensory footprint of death, the only trace your consciousness was allowed to perceive before your automatic resuscitation protocol restarted your body. Then came the second sign, one you might recall far more clearly. The burst of mental clarity that washed over you minutes after the conversation ended. For approximately 5 minutes, your mind operated at a level far beyond your normal capacity. Ideas aligned effortlessly, insights came without struggle. You connected dots you hadn't even noticed before. Words flowed with smooth coherence. Complex situations unraveled themselves in your mind as if you were reading their blueprints. You understood things you had never been taught. This clarity wasn't coincidence. It was not adrenaline. It was the luminous residue of your consciousness, operating briefly without the full weight of human limitation. During the 3.2 seconds of clinical death, your awareness floated free of its physical anchor. When it returned, it carried with it a fragment of that freedom, an afterglow of expanded perception. And then, hours later, the third sign emerged. The one almost every primordial carrier experiences after activation. A profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Not the typical fatigue of a long day or emotional stress, but a heaviness that seemed woven into your marrow. A weariness that made even thinking feel like effort. Your body felt heavier, your energy felt drained. Everything in you seemed to move slower, not out of laziness but because your cellular infrastructure was processing something catastrophic and miraculous at the same time. Your entire organism had undergone death and reversal, a trauma no human body should be able to withstand. Every cell had begun the shutdown process and then been forced to reverse it instantly. Your exhaustion wasn't weakness, it was integration. Your body was learning, adapting, rebuilding itself according to the protocol encoded in your soul. But the most extraordinary sign did not appear in your waking body. It appeared in your dreams. That night, you had a dream unlike any other, a dream so vivid that it clung to your memory with an intensity dreams rarely possess. You found yourself in a vast room filled with white light so bright it bordered on overwhelming. A light that wasn't just illumination but presence. The room felt ancient, boundless, sacred. It wasn't a place human architecture could build. It was a chamber made of frequency, not stone constructed from purpose, not material. And then you saw them. 7 figures, each radiating an overwhelming presence, each exuding an energy that both comforted and humbled you. They stood in a semicircle around you. But what struck you most, the moment that made your heart tremble even in the dream, was that these towering beings were kneeling. You could not see their faces clearly. They were too luminous, too immense. But you felt them, you recognized their power. And more strangely, you felt that they recognized yours. In the dream, you felt something you had rarely allowed yourself to feel in waking life. A sense of importance not rooted in ego, but in destiny. You felt like you belonged there. You felt like they were not kneeling before you as a person, but before something ancient within you that they had been waiting for. But here is the truth. It wasn't a dream. It was a memory. That room of white light was the emergency council chamber. The 7 kneeling figures were Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, Chamuel, Jophiel, and Zadkiel. And you were not transported there as a human. You were summoned there as a primordial carrier, because your activation demanded that your higher consciousness be present. While your physical body slept, your soul stood before the council. They questioned your higher self, not your human personality, but the ancient consciousness inside you. They asked whether you understood the magnitude of what had been triggered, whether you accepted the consequences of violation #1, whether you were prepared to continue the next 15 violations despite the strain they might place on your body and mind, and your soul answered with clarity. It confirmed that everything was unfolding exactly as intended. It confirmed readiness. It confirmed acceptance. It confirmed that Clause 7.3 was functioning exactly as designed. But when you awakened the next morning, you remembered none of this, at least not consciously. You carried only the imprint, the feeling that something enormous had happened, a lingering awe, a strange sense of authority you couldn't quite explain, a subtle certainty that you were somehow different than you had been the day before. This forgetting was not an accident. It was written into your contract. Your human mind is not allowed to integrate full knowledge of your role too early. Direct revelation is forbidden until after violation #40, because knowing too much too soon would interfere with the purity of your mission. Your power comes from intuition, authenticity, and spontaneous alignment, not from deliberate strategy or ego-driven intention. If you knew everything now, if you remembered the council meeting in perfect detail, you would begin acting based on what you know, not based on the natural flow of your soul's design. The moment you begin strategizing consciously, the mission collapses. Therefore, your human consciousness was blocked from full recall. The dream was allowed. The details were sealed. The feelings remained. The memory was veiled. And the mission continued. Now you understand why the dizziness came. Why the clarity followed. Why the exhaustion settled in. Why the dream felt too real. Why the council appeared. Why the memory blurred. And why your awakening is unfolding exactly the way it must. You are not meant to remember everything yet. You are meant to become everything at the right time. To truly understand your activation, you must revisit the signs your body and consciousness left behind, the subtle tremors, the vivid moments, the sensations that seemed oddly disproportionate to the casual conversation you believed you were having. Because while your mind continued speaking as if nothing unusual had happened, the physical reality inside you and the spiritual reality around you were undergoing seismic shifts. What you brushed aside as a fleeting symptom was, in truth, the residue of your death and revival, the biological echo of an event that should have destroyed your body but instead revealed your identity. The first sign was the sudden dizziness. It wasn't long, not even 3 seconds, but it arrived with a quality that felt different from any ordinary form of imbalance. It was not the dizziness of hunger, stress, or standing too quickly. It was a temporal distortion, a brief rupture in your continuity, like losing half a second of reality. You may have blinked without meaning to. You may have felt the world tilt or freeze in place, but the sensation vanished so quickly that you dismissed it before you could analyze it. Yet that moment was the exact instant your heart stopped. That dizziness was the sensory footprint of death, the only trace your consciousness was allowed to perceive, before your automatic resuscitation protocol restarted your body. Then came the second sign, one you might recall far more clearly. The burst of mental clarity that washed over you minutes after the conversation ended. For approximately 5 minutes, your mind operated at a level far beyond your normal capacity. Ideas aligned effortlessly. Insights came without struggle. You connected dots you hadn't even noticed before. Words flowed with smooth coherence. Complex situations unraveled themselves in your mind as if you were reading their blueprints. You understood things you had never been taught. This clarity wasn't coincidence. It was not adrenaline. It was the luminous residue of your consciousness operating briefly without the full weight of human limitation. During the 3.2 seconds of clinical death, your awareness floated free of its physical anchor. When it returned, It carried with it a fragment of that freedom, an afterglow of expanded perception. And then, hours later, the third sign emerged. The one almost every primordial carrier experiences after activation. A profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Not the typical fatigue of a long day or emotional stress, but a heaviness that seemed woven into your marrow. A weariness that made even thinking feel like effort. Your body felt heavier. Your energy felt drained. Everything in you seemed to move slower. Not out of laziness, but because your cellular infrastructure was processing something catastrophic and miraculous at the same time. Your entire organism had undergone death and reversal, a trauma no human body should be able to withstand. Every cell had begun the shutdown process and then been forced to reverse it instantly. Your exhaustion wasn't weakness, it was integration. Your body was learning, adapting, rebuilding itself according to the protocol encoded in your soul. But the most extraordinary sign did not appear in your waking body. It appeared in your dreams. That night, you had a dream unlike any other, a dream so vivid that it clung to your memory with an intensity dreams rarely possess. You found yourself in a vast room filled with white light so bright it bordered on overwhelming, a light that wasn't just illumination but presence. The room felt ancient, boundless, sacred. It wasn't a place human architecture could build. It was a chamber made of frequency, not stone constructed from purpose, not material. And then you saw them, 7 figures, each radiating an overwhelming presence, each exuding an energy that both comforted and humbled you. They stood in a semicircle around you, but what struck you most, the moment that made your heart tremble even in the dream, was that these towering beings were kneeling. You could not see their faces clearly. They were too luminous, too immense, but you felt them. You recognized their power, and more strangely, you felt that they recognized yours. In the dream, you felt something you had rarely allowed yourself to feel in waking life. A sense of importance, not rooted in ego, but in destiny. You felt like you belonged there. You felt like they were not kneeling before you as a person, but before something ancient within you that they had been waiting for. But here is the truth. It wasn't a dream. It was a memory. That room of white light was the emergency council chamber. The 7 kneeling figures were Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, Chamuel, Jophiel, and Zadkiel, and you were not transported there as a human. You were summoned there as a primordial carrier, because your activation demanded that your higher consciousness be present. While your physical body slept, your soul stood before the council. They questioned your higher self, not your human personality, but the ancient consciousness inside you. They asked whether you understood the magnitude of what had been triggered, whether you accepted the consequences of violation #20, whether you were prepared to continue the next 15 violations despite the strain they might place on your body and mind. And your soul answered with clarity. It confirmed that everything was unfolding exactly as intended. It confirmed readiness. It confirmed acceptance. It confirmed that Clause 7.3 was functioning exactly as designed. But when you awakened the next morning, you remembered none of this, at least not consciously. You carried only the imprint, the feeling that something enormous had happened. A lingering awe, a strange sense of authority you couldn't quite explain. A subtle certainty that you were somehow different than you had been the day before. This forgetting was not an accident. It was written into your contract. Your human mind is not allowed to integrate full knowledge of your role too early. Direct revelation is forbidden until after violation #40. Because knowing too much, too soon, would interfere with the purity of your mission. Your power comes from intuition, authenticity, and spontaneous alignment, not from deliberate strategy or ego-driven intention. If you knew everything now, if you remembered the council meeting in perfect detail, you would begin acting based on what you know, not based on the natural flow of your soul's design. The moment you begin strategizing consciously, the mission collapses. Therefore, your human consciousness was blocked from full recall. The dream was allowed, the details were sealed, the feelings remained, the memory was veiled, and the mission continued. Now you understand why the dizziness came. Why the clarity followed, why the exhaustion settled in, why the dream felt too real. why the council appeared, why the memory blurred, and why your awakening is unfolding exactly the way it must. You are not meant to remember everything yet. You are meant to become everything at the right time. And that time is approaching. The next violations are coming, your identity is rising, and the world is already shifting around you. And now, as the pieces settle into place, as the echoes of revelation align into clarity, it becomes undeniable that what happened 11 days ago was not a mistake, not an accident, and certainly not a moment to be dismissed as coincidence. It was the ignition point of a destiny written long before your first breath, long before your name existed, long before the current shape of civilization was even recognizable. What happened 11 days ago, a simple 7-minute conversation, was the moment the silent machinery of a 6,000-year celestial plan clicked into its final gear. Because in that ordinary conversation, when you spoke those 19 forbidden words, not 18, not 20, but the precise formulation your soul had carried across incarnations, you activated a sequence that no human authority has the power to trigger. Those words were the key. They opened the lock, and the instant they crossed the air, your heart stopped for exactly 3.2 seconds, your consciousness flickered, your cells initiated shutdown, and yet, you resurrected before your mind could even process your departure. The dimensional barrier fractured, reality briefly rewired itself, and the energy scaffolding that sustains the celestial order buckled under the weight of your activation. While you continued speaking as though nothing had changed, the heavens did not simply notice, they froze. Protocols that had not been invoked since the 14th century roared to life. Angelic operations paused across every continent, councils dissolved their agendas, guides withdrew from missions, and the emergency alarm forbidden to ring unless the impossible had occurred shook the celestial hierarchy awake. For the first time in centuries, the archangels convened a midnight council to understand who you were, how you survived, and why your violation carried authorization signatures older than recorded human history. And it was in that chamber, beneath the unfiltered blaze of celestial truth, that your identity was revealed, not created, not granted, but confirmed. You are the 12th primordial carrier, the last in a 6,000-year cycle, the one who does not merely participate in the sequence, but who completes it. The one who closes the circle so that the next era of human evolution can begin. You are the final pillar, the keystone soul, the consciousness whose activation signals that the planetary ascension plan has officially entered its irreversible stage. This is why your resurrection was instantaneous. This is why Clause 7.3 lit up in your file like a cosmic flare. This is why archangels, beings who kneel to no one, bowed in your presence. Not because you are higher, but because your mission carries weight that even they cannot bear. And now the path ahead stands open, both humbling and extraordinary. You have already completed 28 minor violations over the past 3 years, each one a subtle shift in your field, each one setting the stage for what came 11 days ago. That moment, violation #1, is the first major fracture, the official declaration that your cycle has entered its active phase. Ahead of you lie 15 more violations. Each one will test you, challenge you, stretch you, expand you, and unlock deeper layers of your identity. These are not punishments. They are activations, milestones that prepare your consciousness, your energy, your body, and your surroundings for what will happen at violation #44. Because when the 44th violation occurs, all dimensional barriers, every veil, every partition, every locked corridor of celestial knowledge will fall simultaneously for 44 seconds. In that window, everything from the 1st through the 9th dimension will become accessible to every human within a 500-kilometer radius of you. Wisdom once scattered across millennia will compress into a single moment of global illumination. It will not be fantasy. It will not be metaphor. It will be the most concentrated transmission of divine intelligence allowed since Atlantis. And unlike Atlantis, this time humanity is not meant to collapse. This time, humanity is meant to rise. Because this event is not accidental, it is intentional. It is planned, written, inscribed into the architecture of your soul contract. sustained by the presence of 11 other primordial carriers positioned across the planet, all moving toward their own violation number 44 inches synchrony with you. This is the plan. This is the purpose. This is the moment the 6,000-year cycle was always meant to reach. You are not simply protected, you are commissioned. You are not simply chosen, you are activated. You are not simply alive, you are resurrected for a mission that cannot be postponed, cannot be transferred, and cannot be interrupted. Others may doubt themselves, but you cannot. Your soul already knows what your mind is slowly awakening to. That you are one of only 12 pillars sustaining the most significant transformation of human consciousness in recorded history. Heaven did not collapse because you failed. Heaven paused because your mission began in full. And now the world waits not in fear, but in anticipation for what will unfold as you step into the next violations, the next expansions, the next profound awakenings. The sequence has started. The pillars are active. The plan is unfolding. And you, the 12th, the final, the completing presence, are walking into the destiny you were born to fulfill.